One of the greatest fears of a mother is that everybody's going on with life and you just hope that your daughter will not be forgotten.
It's burned right into your soul and into your heart and your mind.
I'm journalist Angela Kennecke. I lost my oldest child, Emily, to fentanyl poisoning in 2018. Emily was just 21. Her death was preceded by years of struggle, the struggle of addiction so many families face today. We were just 3 days away from holding an intervention when she died. We couldn't save her.
There's a term called amelioration of grief, and it means that grief takes time, and it will get better only if you put work into it.
In this podcast, I'm grieving out loud with other parents who've lost children and with those currently struggling with the monster of addiction.
I didn't want to go into withdrawal. It was like one of the biggest fears of my life at the time.
You were terrified of withdrawal?
Terrified.
Why?
It is the worst pain, illness, the worst feeling that I could ever imagine having.
I'm also learning from experts in the field on how we can and must do better to treat this disease of the brain.
We treat the addiction and the effect of the addiction, but we're not looking at the pain. The root cause.
Today I am joined by author Pat Sheveland. Pat wrote a book called How Do I Survive? 7 Steps to Living After Child Loss. Pat, thank you so much for being with us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Angela. I'm very honored to be here.
Tell me a little bit about why you wrote this book. You didn't actually lose a child yourself.
Correct. People assume that I lost the child myself, but what happened is my parents, I had a brother that was born and died before I was born. And so I was born into a grieving family, but they didn't really express it. This was, 68 years ago, and they didn't express their grief. They didn't talk about it. And it took several years before I even realized that I had this brother in addition to all my other brothers. And when my brother would have turned 60, I had some epiphanies in life about my relationship with him, even though we were 6 years apart and I never knew him. But it also was a time that my mom allowed to open up the grief that had been buried within her for 60 years. So we did a lot of work together to try to help her give her grief air, give it air so that she could actually start the healing process, which she hadn't been able to do for 60 years.
Don't you think that's also part of that generation, your mother's generation? I have a friend whose aunt died and at 21, and her family never talked about it. They buried her, and the dad will never talk about this again. And I think that was very typical of maybe the previous generations, just to want to you move on. You don't talk about it. You bury your grief.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a big part of it. And there was a lot of layering of grief in my family at the time because there had been 4 deaths all within a matter of like a couple of months that were all immediate family members to my dad's side of the family. And so once we started talking, we realized that there was a reason why they really couldn't talk about it. Everybody was so engulfed in this layered grief that it was very, very difficult. And my mom felt, frankly, very abandoned at that time, which really shut her down then.
I think it's easy for parents who are grieving to feel abandoned anyway, even though maybe now we talk more about grief these days. Things change. People around you shift and change. Not everybody wants to be around somebody who's grieving. When you wrote the book, who were you targeting?
People like yourself. Honestly, I was a corporate executive and in the corporate field for 25 years. I'm a nurse by background, a registered nurse, which is where I started, really holding the space and helping with grieving families. Spent a lot of time in my own family holding the hands of loved ones who had died and during their transition. But when I opened my coaching business, I wanted to become a life coach since the late 1990s, before it was really a thing. And I decided I'm going to do this. This is something I really want to do because I love working with people and helping people. And I wanted to get out of the corporate gig and get into my next chapter of life, so to speak. And when I opened up my coaching business, you have to open a coaching business in order to get the hours to get certified. And it just so happened that the first 2 clients were grieving moms. One was where her child had died. He was 14 and he had died in a accident, like a 3-wheeler, something like that, about 5 years prior. So she was just going through some real changes in her life and trying to figure out her next step. But it was interesting. The other person came to me because she was grieving the death of her father. But once we started talking, she opened up about how her daughter was 7 and had died by an accident 30 years prior. So it was like all of a sudden life was just presenting me with grieving moms. And I just knew that this was my role in life now. I needed to really help moms and families kind of maneuver through this in the best way and hold the space in total love to help them find lives that are filled with some peace and purpose after such tragedy.
Right. It is hard to find your purpose. Like life can seem meaningless after such a great loss. You say 7 steps in the title of your book. So I'm really curious about that, because the one thing I found after I lost Emily was that I immediately, the amount of pain and anguish is so overwhelming. And you're just looking for someone to tell you, like, this is how you make it better, or you do this thing, or you do that thing. And I'm like a researcher, so I'm reading and looking at some point I realized there was no quick fix. There was no easy thing, that I had to learn to live with this pain. And over time, and it's only been a couple of years, but over time, the pain is not as intense, but it's always there. And it comes back in intensity sometimes, but I mean, it's not at that level, like where you feel like you can't possibly, how could you even function in life, right? If the pain remained at this intense level at all hours of the day and night. But there is really no quick fix for grief, is there? I mean, I love the idea of 7 steps, so I want to know what that is. But and I did take a look at your book, and I think we have a lot to talk about. But tell me why you came up with that idea of 7 steps.
And so let me first talk about when I in grief, and you are an expert, unfortunately, of this. But what happens when that trauma initially is there? I'm going to speak in nursey terms because I'm a nurse and medical background, but it's like being in a horrific accident and your body is totally mangled. And what happens? A lot of times you may be put into an induced coma for a while, right? If you have, brain injuries and swelling and all of that type of thing. And so your body is just kind of being insulated through this medical coma. It feels like grief, and that initial stages of grief is just like that for your psychological body, is to just kind of put you in that coma phase. And that takes a while. So I don't even recommend when people come to me and it's just really fresh, their grief is just, the death has just occurred and it's very, they need to have that time to just be insulated in their grief, be surrounded by their friends and family, and just kind of be in that fog of grief. But then over time, as you probably know, then you start wanting to, okay, I need to figure out what are some things that I can do. And that's where the 7 steps came in. It's not a quick and easy fix, for sure.
Yeah. I want to just touch on what you just said there about the early stages, because I was very fortunate. I had a short-term disability policy. So I was able to take 3 months off of work. Work was checking with me, going back, that kind of thing, but they were understanding. And I don't think I could have functioned. And I was surrounded by my family, and my best friend came from out of town and stayed with me a couple different times. And I had that sort of insulation period. I know a lot of moms who went back to work after like a week or 2 weeks, or even dads. And I just feel like I think I would have just crashed and burned out at another time then. And so I think that's society wants you to okay, you've taken your 3 bereavement days or something, or we've given you 2 weeks or whatever it is. Now get back to work. And I think that that's unrealistic expectation, because I do liken losing a child or having that incredible kind of trauma to a brain injury. I mean, I really think I was in shock for the first year, quite frankly. But so how do we get people to understand that someone who's lost somebody very significant in their lives, it doesn't necessarily have to be a child, but that you need that time. I mean, we don't allow that in our society.
We don't. Well, this is a quick fix society, as you know, in all the work that you've done and everything that you've experienced. We are, let's take a pill, let's do this, we want it over with. And we don't do grief well here in the United States. I'm going to be very frank about that. Even if we get into cultures within the United States, when my nephew died, when Coleman died, it was a Native American culture. And we took the time where there was this 4 days of this wake and then a wiping of the tears ceremony. And so it wasn't like that you're going to stop grieving, but it really allowed 24/7. We were there and we were in the teepee. We were with, his body. We were with the family, and we spent so much. I mean, it was total immersion and spending that time to help in a little bit of that grieving process. But, think back into like the 1800s or whatever, when people would wear the mourning black, and they might do it for a year. I was just talking to Marianne Williamson. I don't know if you know who she is, but she was.
I do know who Marianne
Williamson is. So I was on a call with her the other day, and, she was talking about in the Jewish Talmud or whatever the book is that she was talking about, is that there were rules, and you could actually get up from the dinner table if you were grieving without having to be excused or wait till the end of dinner, because they honored that grieving process and allowed it to go on. But it is kind of a quick fix thing here. And so what I tell families that are coming to me and moms that are coming to me, especially if they're coming to me and it's only been, 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, depending on where they're at, I will tell them, I think that you need to just have some time here. And the biggest thing is you need to be kind to yourself. There is no timetable. There is no cookie cutter process for grief. You are alone, and you're doing your own grief journey. Even your family members are going to have a different pattern, a different way of moving through. And it's not moving over it. It's not getting over it. It's moving through the various times. And this is a lifelong thing. I have a friend who, her son was 21, her one and only child. She was a single parent. He died 11 years ago. And I have to tell you, the 10th year has been really, really difficult. She's working through it, but all of a sudden that just kind of showed up for her, where she's been doing pretty darn good, but those times happen.
Well, we could certainly learn from other cultures. I had the privilege of having a wiping of the tears ceremony performed for me by a South Dakota tribe. And I wrote a blog about it. It's on the website here, but it was the most incredible healing thing. And I just think we could really take our cues from other cultures on how to better help people grieve and feel the support and love, instead of trying to act like it didn't happen or like you're just going to move on. But let's talk about some of the content of the book, because I want to make sure we get to that. Okay. 7 steps. What are the 7 steps?
Okay, so the 7 steps just so happen that I use the acronym BREATHE. Because what's the first thing when we go deep into grief? We forget how to breathe. We bring that and the air gets caught in our chest, and when we're sobbing, and so it's so difficult. And so we have to learn how to breathe, to inhale and exhale. That's so important emotionally and physically throughout this. So that's what I use. So there are 7 steps. So the first one is just really understanding who you are today, when you're starting to kind of step into, okay, I'm looking into the future a little bit, but who are you today? Because when we have a tragic loss, when your daughter died, everything changed.
Changes you.
Your values probably change. Things that were important to you before are not the things that are important, and vice versa, right?
Right.
All of those things change. So it's really understanding. So I use different tools that are some are tests that we use, some are just evaluating where you're at in various areas of your life. And I also use a program called Human Design to kind of see who are you when you came into this world based upon your birth date and your where you were born and that type of thing, because it gives a really good idea of what are your strengths and who you really are at the very core of your personality level, so that we can use all of those things to help as, you know, that my clients are walking through this journey to help them. So if they want to do something, we can pull on their strengths, or maybe sometimes their strengths may end up getting into their way. It could be Achilles heel. And so we work with that and this understanding, just have a baseline of where you're at. So that's the first thing that we do. So being clear on who you are today, that's the B in breathe. Then the next step is reimagining your life. And this is really...
That's hard to do, because I think the hopelessness that comes along with grief and the feeling like there is no real future, like it's been robbed from you, even though, I mean, I always bring gratitude into it, but even though you may have other kids or a spouse or a career or whatever, it does feel hopeless sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes all that may be is, I just want to find peace. I've had clients, I had a couple that I just worked with recently, and I had both of them together as I was coaching with them. And they both came up after this exercise, because I do a guided imagery meditation to help kind of envision what we're looking for. And both of them just came up with a simple thing: I just want peace. I just want to feel some peace. So it may not be a big visionary thing. It can be as simple as, I just want to find ways to find peace in my heart, or find a little contentment because I don't feel that way. So that's what this is just, what is it you may want to see in yourself in 6 months or a year from now, and how do you look? How do you feel? What's that dream state? And that can be hard, because you may not feel that. And that's why I think early on, it's very difficult to say that. You know, it's, give it a year, give it 2 years. You know, a lot of the people I work with, it's not something that we start working together within, 3 months to 6 months. They've been walking this journey for a while. So that's what that is. And it's using a guided imagery meditation that I have, that I share. And when they get the book, then they can actually reach out to me and I give them a recording. So that's the reimagining your life is the R and breathe. And then it's engaging your tribe. And this is the one that I feel is probably one of the most critical, is a lot of times we lean on our family members, right? But our family members are grieving deeply too. And so there's that, you need to have a couple of people that can be a little bit removed from that are solely your tailor-made support team. And so I encourage people to choose 1 or 2 people and actually have conversations with them, asking them to be part of that tribe. That, when you're calling in the middle of the night because you can't sleep, they're willing to answer the phone and talk you off the cliff. That they're willing.
It can be hard to find those people. It can be hard to find. I mean, I'm lucky. I have a couple of really close friends that I know I can lean on. I don't know if I call them in the middle of the night, but maybe I could have early on.
Yeah.
But you also, like, friends shift and change. I hear that from everybody who loses a child, that their friendships change too. So some people that they thought they could count on, they couldn't.
Right. And that'll shift. Again, that shifts over time. But in this initial program that I talk about, find and don't, it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but 2 people. Your family is a support. You're all going through this together and have a great understanding. But I'm going to use an example. This couple that I recently worked with, dad and mom, and when we started working, I could tell by the way that they looked at each other, because their son had died by suicide. They didn't want to talk freely because they'd look at each other and they didn't want to hurt the other person. They didn't want to open up all this stuff. But they told me, later that it felt so much better having someone like myself in the room with them, because they felt safe and knew that I was there for their spouse, that I could be supportive for them, and
like
that,
you were a buffer. You were a
yeah,
buffer.
and could hold
Yeah.
them in that love. So that's really important. And figuring out what are some of the, I call them treaties, because I do have the Native American and indigenous on my husband's side of the family, so I take a lot from that. But I think, that's tribes and villages really do create a safe way of healing. So that's a really important piece, is, figuring out those couple of people.
Gauge your tribe is E. What about A?
Okay, that's accessing your inner healer. And so when you're deep in grief, what happens? You may not eat, or you may overeat. You may use self-medication, whatever it is for people. It's just a way to kind of insulate and numb that grief, and may not get the exercise and all of that. So I have various tools that I encourage people to create their own kind of health program. And so it's not like you have to get out and start jogging, but I also am a Spring Force Qigong teacher, and Qigong is ancient Chinese medicine and wisdom, where you can use emotions to help heal yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So I teach my clients some movements there to help them in the breathing and just create that calm and peace.
It's kind of, yoga, similar, right? Like yoga has some similar ideas of healing. Not every type of yoga, but there are different types of physical things we can do to heal the emotions and the mind and the emotional body as well.
Yeah, using the breathing and just working on the mind and the emotional body, and it also helps in the physical body. So that is, and I also have my clients, I coined the phrase for faith, finding awesome inspiration to heal. And basically what that is coming up with a list of things that self-care activities. So it may be just taking a nice bath with lavender and Epsom salts. It may be just opening up the window and just listening to the birds outside, just quieting and breathing and listening to the birds. Simple things like that, so that when one of those emotional, the roller coaster is just like at its peak, and you feel like what am I going to do? You can look at the list and say, okay, I'm going to do this one. And that's been really effective for people, is just to say,
That's
I don't have to
idea.
think about it. I don't have to think about it. I can just, I'll pick one off the list.
So make a list. All right.
Yep. And then just finding those things to keep yourself healthy. And then the next step is transforming your view. And that's probably one of the most difficult, I would say, is because it's going a little bit deeper. A lot of time when we are grieving and we're hit with a trauma such as what you've gone through, you're bringing with you all of your past experiences, any other griefs that you've had in the past, any traumas that you've had in the past. It's like all of a sudden this all comes to the table of grief, and it's overwhelming. So there may be beliefs that you have that you're struggling with right now, or anger and guilt, of course, are huge after the loss of a child, because as a parent, we want to protect and we can't.
And I think for those of us who have lost our children to addiction, that is especially true, because in a society we're taught, first of all, that we should be able to somehow control that as parents, right? And we, no matter what kind of help we sought for them, no matter how we try, it's such a difficult situation to navigate when a child is rebelling or using drugs, and it's just such a hard thing, and parents get blamed a lot. And so I think all those would have, should have, could have. I mean, I do that to this day. I thought the other day, well, maybe if I would have reacted in this way when she did this, instead of the way I reacted, maybe she would still be alive. And I learned a lot along the way in dealing with someone who was using drugs. I learned a lot how to better react, how to better cope. But I mean, that is a hard thing, I think, for all of us, who are in the same boat where we've lost our child to overdose.
Yep. And absolutely, or if your child has died by suicide. What could I have done to change that? But even for my mom, my brother was only 4 months old. He was healthy, he was fine, he had his baby shots, and then he died that night. So for 60 years, she carried this guilt, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration at not being supported, but the guilt was just horrendous. And so then when we started unwrapping that, because she thought that she had done something or that she didn't do something, and so I walked her through, and that's where sometimes it's helpful to have a more objective person to just kind of walk through your story, because once I walked through it and I reiterated that back to her about what happened from the moment she took him to the doctor to get his shots throughout that whole day and that evening, and put it in a factual basis, all of a sudden I said, from my point of view, Mom, he had an anaphylactic reaction. He had a bad reaction. Doesn't happen often, but this is what I see. And it just kind of opened her eyes, and she could just, like, her shoulders went down and she breathed and just thought, but she needed to give air to that guilt. She needed to share that out loud because it was eating her up.
So is that what you advise people do? Find some, maybe a counselor or a trusted friend or somebody to talk to about those feelings of guilt or shame or regret?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or a coach,
I also think I also have come to the realization while I talk to you about how these thoughts pop into my head from time to time. I've come to the realization that I'm not that powerful. Like, I cannot control another human being, and I can't control circumstances. And I think so often we as mothers, especially, I always say I've got I've got a couple other kids doing this thing and that thing, and some of them are really great things that these kids are doing. Well, do I take 100% credit for that and then 100% blame for my child who became addicted? Well, no, I'm not really. I mean, sure, I gave them all a loving, nurturing environment. They were all raised basically the same way. But if I take all the blame for the bad things that happen or a bad choice that a child makes, I take all the credit for the good. I mean, I just don't have that much power or that much control.
Yep. And I mean, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of when you can look at it from a little bit different perspective and having someone kind of help you reframe that. That's what it is. And reframing it in a way that it's kind of telling yourself the story and changing up this story in a way that that you can live with it, that you can live with the circumstances.
A lot of us walk around with faulty thinking. A lot of us walk around with ideas that just aren't true. And we keep telling those things to ourselves, and they seem like they are true, but they aren't always.
Right.
Are we on H?
Oh, yep. Honoring your child. Honoring your child. And you do this.
I do it. If you look while we're speaking here, one of Emily's paintings is right behind us. And, I honor her through her art and through trying to help other people, which actually helps me.
Yep. And we're going to get to that because that's kind of the last part of it. But honoring your child, it is so important that we keep their spirit alive and everything about them and talk about them. And a lot of times people get uncomfortable, right? You've probably noticed that. It's like, oh, I don't know if I should talk about Emily. Should I not talk about Emily? And it's like, what do you think, that you're going to make Mom sadder? You're going to make Angela sadder by talking about Emily? Well, you know what? She's always sad. I mean, she's always going to have this heartache. So yes, let's talk and embrace and celebrate the beautifulness of the children. And so ceremony is really important. And I do work, I've been volunteering at a children's grief camp here in Minnesota and Wisconsin for several years. And that's one of the things that we do is we have the children come and their families, and we kind of split them apart, but they engage in the same activities. And one of them is this ceremony, so that they can go home and they can create their own ceremonies. And it's so important. And I just tell people, your ceremony might just be you with a candle, or it may be, but figure out those times and how you want to do that and incorporate it into your life, because the more that you celebrate and honor your child, you're honoring your own grief.
Oh, I love that. That's a beautiful way to put it. And the last step?
Okay, embracing change through hope. And so hope is another one of my little acronyms that I came up with years ago. And it just came to me, and it's like honoring our purpose every day. We all come here with a purpose. And sometimes we don't know what that purpose is. And sometimes it does take absolute tragedy for us to realize what that purpose is. But you're a prime example. You have taken something so tragic, so traumatic, but you're creating awareness and you're using your platform and who you are to be able to get out there and help families and help educate. That's what, and so some families, their purpose may be to raise their grandchildren. You know, I have a sister-in-law where my niece died, you know, at a fairly young age. And so there was a granddaughter involved. And so then she brought in, and they raised that grandchild until she was adopted by my other niece. But that's a purpose. That's finding that life purpose, that when we help others, that's when we heal, because we get out of ourselves and we start giving to others.
Yeah, I think that that's very true. And I think my purpose came kind of through my daughter's death. I always thought as a journalist, my purpose was to tell stories, and my purpose was to help people through storytelling and through awareness and letting people know, you know, what's happening in the world. And I still think those are important things, but I think I found a deeper purpose to help people and to help people understand just reducing the stigma is so important to me, because I feel like we are all one, and there's really no difference between you and I or the addict over there in the corner who feels shamed and who feels separate, but really is not. And so that has been something that I has sort of reignited my passion, because after her death, I did feel a lot of, well, just a loss of purpose, a loss of faith, a loss of, like, it feels like, I was thinking about this, it just feels like the rug has been pulled out from under you. And what are you supposed to do with nothing, no footing, you know, nothing underneath you? But I have to say that the amount of love from people that I didn't even know, that because I shared her story and because I've been working to get rid of the stigma and the shame, has just been overwhelming, and has helped solidify that, yes, I do have this purpose now, and I still maybe have my other purpose to a great extent, because that's important too. But this is something that, I mean, I do podcasts on my own time. I write blogs on my own time. You know, I run a charity on the side. So obviously, I mean, I could be doing a lot of other things, but it does, just knowing one person was helped, and maybe one family doesn't have to go through the same thing that my family has gone through, is incredibly healing to me. It almost seems selfish. Do you know what I mean? Like, people say, "Oh, you're so selfless," and I said, "No, I am selfish," because just knowing that my daughter's death makes a difference somehow. It wasn't just for nothing. Is something that helps me go on, you know, every day of my life.
And I'm going to go back to, it's so important. We are social creatures. We are here to help one another. It's not all about self-serving interests. And so once we can open up and start sharing and helping, like what you're doing so beautifully, that is a healing. That's a healing process. You know, I've known too many people who are friends and family members where they never found that purpose, and numbed it in so many different ways, and their lives ended with that tragedy, you know, and it was just like replicated tragedy, because their child died and then they ended up not being able to move forward. And my book was really written by all these women such as yourself. I just take myself as I'm the scribe. You're the journalist, I'm the scribe. They shared all of what they're doing, what works, what doesn't, and then working with all of my coaching clients and working intimately with my mother is where I saw what are some of the things that are really helpful and that help people to move on with their lives and find that peace, find that purpose. And I've also seen where it didn't work so well. So that's what I did, is I'm the scribe. I've taken all the wisdom of all of you who are walking this path and putting it into a way that maybe there's some helpful tools. And I know that it works well for lots of people because they're ready for it. But if you're not ready to do that movement, that's okay too. I mean, that's where it's being kind to yourself, but you're helping others, and it's not self-centered at all, or you know, it's necessary for your healing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of healing in that. If there's something a few thoughts you could leave grieving parents with today, I think that the desperation, the hopelessness, the depression, all of that, I mean, we all experience that at different times. Hopefully we don't stay there. We don't stay stuck in that. And that's what I think your steps are very good at outlining how not to stay stuck. But if you just could offer some advice for someone who's struggling.
The number one advice I offer everyone is please be kind to yourself. The kindness needs to be to yourself and to not feel like you have to live within others' expectations. Because as I said, and as you know, there is no timetable. There is no cookie cutter process. 7 steps is not a cookie cutter process. We all go through all of these feelings, emotions, and journeys at a different path, at a different time frame. So I say be kind to yourself. So whenever you're feeling a little out of sorts, or you're feeling like maybe people are judging, or you shoulda, coulda, woulda, it's like take and breathe. And that's the other thing, that's the first thing that I teach people, is you have to learn to breathe. So remember when our parents probably said, our grandparents say, count to 10 before you react. Breathing in the midst of such emotional, the emotional tsunamis, is just to say, take 3 to 5 just really good, deep, gentle breaths. And I guarantee you, because there's a physiological change that goes on in your body, you can finally start getting everything settling down.
It also brings us back into the moment when we breathe, brings us into the now, which is very hard for those of us who are grieving to be. It's very hard just for us to get there because we spent so much time in the past with what we should have, could have, would have done differently, or thinking about the person we missed and the memories, or we spend a lot of time in the future thinking about, oh, I'm missing out on this. Like, for example, I'll never have a wedding that my daughter or grandchildren, from that daughter. And that's another huge loss. But when we get stuck in those two places and we're not right here now, present, that's, I think, when we really get overwhelmed with the emotions. Yes. It's those thoughts that trigger that. So I do agree, just being able to stop and breathe and say, okay, I'm all right now in this moment, and in the next 10 seconds or whatever it might be, but not to get out there too far.
Right.
I think that's what our breath does for us, is really bring us back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So and it's simple. It's a simple technique, but it's a habit that needs to be learned, because we forget to breathe. And in the ancient,
we're not taught. We're never taught that as children.
And the other thing, just I'm going to bring this in real quick, is, as I said, I'm a Qigong teacher and have been pretty steeped in the Qigong culture, which is ancient Chinese medicine. And the emotion of grief settles in our lungs. And so we can have lung issues. And so people who, have experienced the trauma and this deep grief, a lot of times may have lung issues, may end up with breast cancer in that area, so that upper chest area. So our breathing energy system can get blocked. The energy can get blocked. So just by being able to breathe and taking that time to breathe in and out actually physiologically heals us too, and it allows that blockages to be removed.
And I'm going to put some links on this podcast for people so they can learn more about that practice. Well, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to let people know how to get your book, and also some resources that you have in the book. We'll put some links for people as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I just really appreciate your time. And again, I am surrounding you with love and comfort. Every time I meet any family, especially any mama, you go right into my heart. And this is where I hold you all. That's why I'm here, is to hold that and hold all of you.
We need more people like you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. For resources for families and how to get help, just go to Emily's Hope at paintingapathtorecovery.org. If you found this podcast helpful, please consider giving us a positive review. Thank you.